Earlier this month, President Joe Biden called on Congress to lower the cost of prescription drugs, pushing for a measure that would allow the federal government to negotiate drug prices with pharmaceutical companies through Medicare. Lobbyists for Big Pharma have responded with an ad claiming this measure would curb consumer access to medication and allow the government to, quote, decide what medicines Americans on Medicare can get.
I'm Sue and I have type 1 diabetes. I depend on Medicare to get my medicines. It's not always easy, but I make it work. Now some in Congress want to make things even harder. They want to repeal a protection in Medicare that protects access to my medicines. They call it negotiation, but it really means the government decides what medicines I can get. That would make it harder for people on Medicare to get the medicines we need. Medicare means access. Please don't take that away.
Paid for by Pharma.
Investigative reporters for the Real News Network, Taya Graham and Stephen Janis, argue that not only is the ad misleading, but it's also a profit-driven scare tactic. And they join us now to expand on this. Welcome to the show. Taya, I want to start with you. The heart of this issue is in this non-interference clause that was put into effect under George W. Bush that doesn't allow the federal government to negotiate drug prices with the pharmaceutical companies. So, how is there anything in this that is going to prevent, if this is repealed, this aspect of this, is this going to prevent people on Medicare from gaining access to all the medications they need, like this Big Pharma ad sort of insinuates?
Well, the simple answer to that is no. What H.R. 3 does is it allows the federal government to actually be able to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies for the best price. And as a matter of fact, the federal government is the biggest purchaser of drugs in the world, practically in the world, and certainly within the United States. So for a customer to be able to have competition, essentially have the aspects of the free market work, where you have some competition between the pharmaceutical companies. If you don't like the prices, you go elsewhere. It's essentially trying to bring the free market back here.
Yeah, but there is no indication at all that this will prevent someone from getting their insulin. That's just absolutely not true.
And essentially right now, there are diabetics. There's over 30 million diabetics in the United States. And 1 in 4 of them right now, they're rationing their insulin. People are literally dying. Organ failure, emergency room visits. People are having GoFundMe campaigns so they can pay for their insulin. There are literally caravans of Americans going to Canada and Mexico to be able to buy insulin cheaper. So the simple answer is no. This ad is completely misleading.
And Taya, when they're asked to kind of back up this nonsensical claim that negotiating would actually lead to you not being able to get these drugs, what do they point to?
Well, what they initially point to is research and development. The pharmaceutical companies, Eli Lilly, Novo Nordisk, Sanofi, they all say, well, we're not going to be able to have good research and development. We need to invest this money to make new drugs, to make better drugs. And that's simply not true. The majority of the money is given back to the shareholders. It's given to salary and bonuses to CEOs. The top 15 CEOs of the biggest pharmaceutical companies made $500 million last year. That's where the money's going.
I mean, they do spend lots of money on research, right, to produce these drugs. So they also a lot of profits for the companies as well. But they do spend a lot of money on research, don't they?
Yes. Yeah. But if you look at like the 990s of the company that sponsored this ad called Pharma, which is Pharmaceutical Manufacturers Researchers of America, they are funded at roughly about $429 million a year. So they have $429 million to spread around to give to organizations like healthcare and patient advocacy organizations and just about every politician on the list. So they're flush with cash. I mean, the amount they pay their CEOs could research a drug. But in this case, I think there's no evidence that this negotiation would lead to somehow scarcity of drugs for people who need them.
It's interesting that other countries are able to negotiate the prices, but we're not able to. And so did they see, are they looking at the ability for other countries to negotiate, and they're running scared saying, oh no, when they were able to do that, suddenly our profits were cut? Is that what they're thinking?
Well, the thing is that, I think the pharmaceutical industry relies on the U.S. to make a lion's share that sort of the outstanding, the really would say exponential profits, but they do make profits in other countries. But one thing that's really interesting in the email I got from Pharma was that what she said was going to happen was that companies will withdraw their drugs from the U.S. market, because basically companies don't have to participate. They can be charged an excise tax if they don't. And then she said, well, what they'll do is they'll just take their drugs off the market. But it doesn't make any sense, because the U.S. pharmaceutical market, and the federal government is one of the biggest purchasers of drugs in the world. So are you really going to bypass the federal government and not sell them drugs and forego, 30-40% of your revenue on a drug? I don't think so. I think really this is a scare tactic, and that's how it really seems when you look at the numbers.
And I'd like to add that the insulin producer Sanofi, which is based in France, they make $15 million a day off American diabetics. Your average American diabetic who goes to purchase insulin spends about $1,000 a month out of pocket, even with insurance. If you walk into a pharmacy in France and you are a resident of the nation, you can walk in. If you're on their Social Security, you pay nothing. If you aren't, you pay 45 euros out of pocket. But yet the same company that's based in France makes $15 million a day off American diabetics.
All right, and Stephen, H.R. 3 has been included, as you know, in the reconciliation package that Democrats are working on as we speak. What's your sense of how likely it is to make it into the final package, and how robust it will be when it does?
Well, as you pointed out, the Biden administration has made it a big selling point of H.R. 3 that the big selling point of the reconciliation package that H.R. 3 will be included in there. Of course, now we know that Senator Joe Manchin has said, let's take a pause on all this, and Kristen Sinema has said the same. But I don't think H.R. 3 goes anywhere without this, because I think this is a big selling point and something that can really, sort of bread and butter for the constituency to say, look, we lowered drug prices. So I think that the H.R. 3 is probably critical to the passage of the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. One doesn't move without the other, I think.
I think that's right. The Democrats have been running ads nonstop in midterms for a couple cycles now, saying that if you elect us, we're not going to do much, but we will lower the price of drugs. So you at least have to do that. Thank you, guys. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and if you look, this is a classic case of Washington's political economy. I mean, if you go through the 990s of Pharma, you'll see that almost every politician is on the payroll. And so, I think this would be probably one of the most important progressive, issues to pass through, get through that sort of maze of people who are getting money from Pharma not to do this.
Yeah, we'll see.
And the media companies as well. I mean, and that's why these ads are running on news organizations. And those very news organizations then don't take up these news stories to really push, this particular political agenda, or at least open up the minds and tell people what's really going on. They just kind of run these ads and then they ignore the rest of the story. And, the whole establishment is bought off by Big Pharma. So it's really difficult to escape them and to really get the word out and to get the message out.
Yeah, I mean, if you looked, we looked last year during the presidential primary in 2020, that the top three advertisers for CNN were pharmaceutical companies, and a lot of countries ban pharmaceutical companies from advertising for this very reason. So CNN relies on a lot of its revenue from drug companies. So how on earth are they going to be able to report on this objectively and to raise this issue? And especially this super more high ad is running everywhere. So everybody's making money off this. So it really makes it difficult within this political economy to create good policy.
Thanks so much for joining us to talk about this. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for having us on. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
More Rising after this.